So really, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. Departure Lounge, for those who don't know it, occupies a small space opposite the Hat Factory Arts Centre in Luton. It's been there where it is now since September of 2016. We work in close and glorious partnership with the Culture Trust Luton. I set Departure Lounge up in 2010 really as a place because I thought Luton was might be a good place to work. It's proved to be an absolutely astonishingly good place to work, a really interesting place to work, and a great place to do contemporary art. I started it originally to do lots of photography because that is really still my major interest, but we have now reached way outside of photography and do so on a regular basis. But I do like to bring a bit of photography back into the program as much as I can. I have worked in the past very successfully with Natalie, who's co-organized this show with us and collaborates particularly closely with Idit. Natalie approached me, I think it might have been in February of 2019, and said, what about this artist Idit, and how about doing a show? And so it kind of all followed from there. Of course, none of us could possibly have imagined the remarkable changes that would come down on the show, and it is a truly extraordinary testament to Idit's fortitude and forbearance that we've actually managed to get a show at all, and a really interesting show. So that concludes my introduction, but I suppose I would like to start by asking you, Natalie, and you, Idit, who are going to be in conversation for about the next 20 minutes. What was it that really attracted you first to working in Luton, and what attracted you to working together? I'm passing over to you now.
Thank you. Thanks, Matthew. That's very close. Are you happy for me to start, Idit?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So in terms of us working together, so it started with a studio visit to Idit's studio in Cambridge, and that was probably 2 years ago now, although it seems a very long time ago now. But I'd known of Idit's work long before that, and I guess I was very struck and very much admired the importance of collaboration in Idit's work, and how she keeps the audience or the viewer right at the centre of her thinking as she develops the works. I say we share interests in art that talks about important social and political issues, but that involves informal or kind of interactive processes to enable what can be difficult conversations between people to arise quite naturally. So from that studio visit, it developed the process of kind of organic conversations in person, which is obviously hard to imagine right now, but emails and sharing ideas and getting to a point where I think we felt that there was a germ of an idea that we wanted to explore. Idit, would you like to pick up on why Luton?
Yeah, sure. I think that we first went to see Matthew with something very different, which funnily enough ended up coming full circle. I think we went to see him for the blind spot drawings, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it was actually the encounter with Luton that made the subject of home coming to slot into place, really. So yeah, it was, we came to visit and we walked, I seem to remember we walked around the town. I think it was the only time I walked around when it wasn't raining, because since then I've been and it's been raining, and I've only been a few times. And yeah, and we spoke about Luton, and I realized that with all the immigration that's gone on in Luton and everything that, you know, the town symbolizes nowadays, it would make a lot more sense to focus on that subject. And yeah, that's how it started, really. And that was the proposal. So there we go.
Yeah, I think that rich kind of history of migration within Luton seemed to present huge opportunities to listen and to learn, and that kind of those are insights and experiences would be really beneficial in terms of your exploration of what home means to people. So I think that was quite a critical point, wasn't it, coming and kind of getting a much better sense of the town of Luton. And then obviously, Matthew, in terms of Departure Lounge, you know, well aware of the track records you've built in Luton over the last 10 years, but also increasingly how those exhibitions relate and interact with the local community, and those relationships felt so genuine. So it felt right, and it felt incredibly relevant as well. Idit, would you like to discuss the works?
Yeah, so if it's okay, I'll show you some slides, and yeah, we thought it would make sense to start with an overview of what's actually there, just in case some of you haven't seen it. And yeah, so I'm going to try and do the share screen without mucking this up. Hold on. I've missed it. Just a sec. There we go. Right. Can everyone see my slides now?
Yeah.
So yeah, so we thought, yeah, a quick sort of overview, and then we'll get back into the conversation itself. So yeah, as you know, the show is online and it's on the Departure Lounge window, which some of you know and others possibly don't know yet. I hope you will one day. For those of you who don't know Luton, I was struck by how centrally located the gallery is. It's on a really busy thoroughfare that connects the transport hub of the city, which is quite brand new, and the town centre. And it's got these really striking murals just adjacent to the gallery, really close, by Mark Titchener, which I was immediately struck by. I think the first time we visited Luton, the first one was there. And it's a huge mural that says, if you dream it, you must do it, which I thought was a brilliant way to start a project, because that's what these projects are about. You come up with an idea and then you find ways to make it happen. And then by the time we turned up the second time, I think after we got the funding, there was another mural by Mark Titchener not far away, and it says, the future demands your participation, which was brilliant. It's totally relevant to everything that I wanted Draw Me a Home to be about. So it was conceived originally, like we said, as a site-responsive research project, and then, as Matthew pointed out, the COVID-19 outbreak caused it to undergo massive changes. The original idea of turning up in public spaces with a model of a house that I carefully designed and made in order to generate conversations about home and what it means to people in Luton, had to quickly move online and reach people much further afield, I think, than originally planned. We devised a series of, hold on, now it's not moving. So that's the window, sorry. So we devised a series of prompts or provocations that were posted online instead of the pop-up or the actual encounters in public spaces. And we captured those responses over a period of several weeks, just as the lockdown was intensifying and most of the world's population retreated into their own homes. alongside the prompts, which were posted on social media platforms, I wrote a blog that captured some of the sort of thinking, the problems, the questions that arose out of that the process and the lockdown itself. So that was for me a very important part of the process. And the result of this process and the blogs and the prompts sort of gelled into the studio practice itself, and ended up with the current show. I experimented with lots of different things at the beginning when we weren't sure what was going to happen, and gradually things sort of got clearer and clearer, and we came up with a proposal that would be just for the windows and an online show. And that's what there is now. So there's 3 pieces, Phone Home, Blind Spot Drawing Series, and I See You and You See Me. And for those of you who don't know my practice, I should say that, as Natalie has pointed out, it's always, well, I'm very interested in sociable encounters, in playful interactions between the artworks themselves and the audience. So the challenge from day one of lockdown was how to do that when that is the last thing that we're going to be able to do. And also not being able to have the audience for my work touch the actual artworks, because in the past there have been games, there have been slides, there have been things that really people literally touch with their own hands. Was pretty devastating, but there we go. We ended up with 3 pieces that are nevertheless all interactive, one way or another. So Phone Home, just quickly, is inspired by Luton's relationship with the ever-changing and sadly increasing rate of international travel. And most people I've talked to say, oh, Luton, that's where the airport is. And the work is made out of old-fashioned phone cards, which some of you who are old enough to remember will remember using. And I made them into basically a sculptural mobile. So they are sitting in the window as a sculptural mobile, just like the one that hangs up over babies' beds all over the world. And I remember making for my kids. So yeah, they are an extraordinary array of sort of weird and wonderful graphic pieces, really. So the mobile is just part of it, though, because the piece itself, and it's really just a prompt in the window for people to actually phone home, which is a big sticker in the window that says, that invites people to ring this number. And some of you I know have rang the number. And I've had several people already tell me that they've heard this or that story and they were really struck. So I hope more of you will do that. And anyway, so that is really the piece, is when you get to the phone, when you actually ring the number, you get to hear some wonderful stories by Andy Kingston, Ali Smith and Sarah Wood, and even I wrote my first short story for this particular piece. And yeah, I strongly encourage everyone to go and listen to them, and you can listen to all of them because it's free. During lockdown, and I should say actually, the Phone Home line also has a 5th option on the menu, which is to leave your own contribution. And I'm really hoping that we will have some lovely texts and yeah, stories, poems, whatever it is that people can leave about with their thoughts and ideas about home. And I'm going to try and collect those and start a little archive. So the other piece is really inspired by this whole process of lockdown. What I was really quite struck by was how we all had to slow down, and how I myself, and I know a lot of my friends and colleagues, almost in response to the barrage of online works and offers for cultural experiences, retreated into a sort of, you know, let's just pause now. Let's just find a way to slow down and go back to traditional ways of working and observe things more carefully and look at what's around us. So I did a lot of drawings and photographs of things around me and outside the window, and some of the prompts reflected that too. So the second piece was called Blind Spot Drawings, and it was inspired by some of those responses that we had to the prompts. I should say that the blind spot drawings is what we started off with, actually, with Matthew. When we came to Luton the first time, it was for doing a series of blind spot drawings, which were going to be participatory in the gallery itself. Anyway, the drawings that are there now, you can see from the titles. Some of you will recognize them from the prompts, and some of you will recognize them from the responses to the prompts. Yeah, I wanted to basically make people stop and look a bit more carefully. So the blind spot drawings are all based on the same principle, which is I make a drawing and then I scribble all over it so that the audience has to look for the signs, for the little clues in there. I remember doing them at the back of the newspaper that my grandparents used to read. So that's the blind spot drawings, and they are all available to download and color in at home. And somebody told me today that he's going to do one a day for 9 days now. So hopefully they will get plenty of downloads. For some reason I can't change the slide. There we go. The third piece is called I See You and You See Me, and it's only half working at the moment, but I'm sure it will work at some point entirely in its entirety. It's a really experimental piece. I have no experience of doing anything like that in the past. So much has happened since those early days in March, then when we suddenly realized that these are really momentous times. And again, like many of my friends and colleagues, we radically changed our routines and our behaviors. So I ended up doing things that I never thought I would, like writing a short story, and lo and behold, installing a webcam in my house and in the gallery. It's an idea that seemed to make sense at the time. And as you can imagine, I've since come to question, but still, I look forward to seeing what it will yield. This one really is a work in progress, and I hope everyone will be interested enough to join me for the next leg of the journey, because as far as I'm concerned, it's just we're on to the next leg of this extraordinary trajectory so far. So that's a quick overview. I'm gonna try and do stop sharing now, which is here. There we go.
Okay.
Hopefully that's of use.
So, have you finished your own conversation, or are you going to carry on talking to Natalie, Edith?
Yeah, no, there were a few questions that I just had, Edith, that I just wanted to, I think will just flesh out some of that detail and background and context to the project. You've given a lot of detail about the works within Draw Me a Home, but it might just be worth taking just a step back for those people who haven't experienced them yet. Just briefly, I mean, if we can just start with the title of the show, Draw Me a Home. We've touched on the fact that ideas of home are important to you and a long-standing interest, but can you describe that just a little bit more detail? That the importance of that within your practice?
Sure. Well, as usual with these things, it's a combination of lots of things, but it's a lot to do with my family history of migration. So a lot of my family has moved since the beginning of the 20th century, I think, probably before that. And I started sort of looking into it when I was doing my PhD. I had to do a presentation, and for some reason I decided to list all the homes and all the wars that my family has experienced since the beginning of the 20th century. And it was quite a chunk of text. I should say also that my PhD was to do with Israel-Palestine, and the whole idea of home there, and people having to leave their homes and people wanting to build a home and what have you is very contested. So that was, has been there for at least 10 years now. I'm also very interested in this idea of refuge, and I've done quite a few pieces on refugees. So they turn up in a game I made once, and a memory game that people played in the gallery. There's also a piece that was at Kettle's Yard last autumn, which is called Refuge. Was also shown in London and has slides of refugees over the decades. So refugees, refuge, homes have always been there. There's also the fact that I'm constantly, well, since 1990, which is a long time now, I've been going backwards and forwards between Israel and Palestine and here. And I was trying to think, when is the point when I started calling the UK my home, which I do now, but it's a funny one when you choose to live somewhere else. Where do you call home? And then yes, as I said earlier, when we got to Luton and realized that there is so much there in terms of migration and movement and moving between places, that it just fell into place.
Just to pick up briefly on something you've just said, Idit, about your interest in migration and refugees. There is a subtle reference to that in Phone Home. Would you maybe just elaborate a little bit more on that?
I think it's a remnant of the original sort of what was going to be the gallery show. I did want to do something with that the orange color of the vest of the refugee, the life vests, the safe, SOS, what do you call them? Yeah, life vests, I think they're called. I've made some work with that before, and I knew I wanted to have it in there, in the gallery show. And then when it was just a window, it dawned on me that actually we can still have that orange. I don't know if it reads, I don't know if people have the same association, but it's there in the window.
Yeah.
It's part of the aesthetic.
As we've touched on earlier, collaboration is a significant part of your artistic process. So you often work with other artists, curators, or invite participants to be involved through, as you say, kind of a playful interactive approach. So whether that's discussions or informal social situations or games. And as you say, planned as part of this project were consultations or pop-up events across Luton. And just as they were about to take place, the imposed lockdown happened, which meant they had to be reimagined online. What were the challenges of working in this way for you, with somebody who enjoys that face-to-face kind of human contact and discussion? And is there anything that you've learned or would taken away from this new way of working?
Well, it's a good question. I think I'm still processing it. So in terms of the challenges, it was a huge shift, and you remember, and Matthew remembers, and all my friends and everyone that my family, everyone that was around me at the time remembers how agonizing it was. I think, yeah, it was this shift between organic sort of interpersonal, you know, encounters, which have a lot to do with chance as well, you know, because you don't plan them as much as you do online things, was really dramatic for me. And I did realize today, I read somebody came up with a wonderful idea of an app that lets you have conversations with random strangers. She was an artist, funnily enough, I think, the person who invented it. And it made me realize that that's one of the things I really miss in this process is chance. Because usually there's a lot of it when you make work and when the process is really interactive. So that was a challenge. And as I said, I'm still processing it. So I've used prompts before, for example, in my collaborative work, we use it a lot. And having them online is a totally different ball game. So that was interesting. You know, it was just a very different way of doing them. Yeah, and the other thing is everything takes a lot longer when it's online, and when it's digital, it's really quite a mind shift. So plenty of challenges. In terms of taking things away or what I've learned, I don't know. I think I'm still processing it. It's about how to operate in this realm, which is basically much more performative, much less spontaneous, I think, and requires, I think, a lot for someone like me, a lot more time to experiment and to try things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I am conscious that
yeah, we're running out of time.
Yeah, of time, and the importance of having plenty of time for questions. So just as a kind of final piece of food for thought. So Draw Me a Home launched on Monday. I say opened, but metaphorically speaking, and can be viewed until the 16th of August. But that's not the end of the project. There are still facets that will develop and continue. So can you just share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah, well, hopefully people got the sense of what's out there, and for me, yeah, it's about what happens next is about the way the audience engages with these pieces, because I've have never made work like that before, so I'm really intrigued and looking forward to seeing how it works. I mean, I know we all know how to sort of check you know, digital engagement in terms of clicks and stuff like that, but it's a very different ballgame when it's about listening to a story and downloading a drawing to do. So I'm just intrigued if people will you know, engage. And in terms of the webcam, I'm looking forward to it working from my home, because at the moment it's a bit stuck with a technical issue. But once it does, I'm planning to sort of actually go back to the prompts that we had in the beginning. So I've started posting. I posted today, but nobody saw it, that we're having the event. I think yesterday I posted something, or on Monday when we launched, I said we were off or something. I'm going to post one thing a day, basically, on that chair. Sometimes I'll sit there and hope that...
Living room, It's in your living room.
It's in my living room, that's right. We were going to sit down there, but it's not very... Yeah, it's a bit of a thoroughfare. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing how it develops, really, because I have no idea. And that's part of the fun, I suppose.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And I believe I'm going to hand back to Matthew.
Yeah, Farhad, if you can hear me, are we going to have questions on chat, or are we going to ask people to raise a hand?
I think the best option would be, obviously, if they can type the questions, and then we can obviously ask Edith about the project. That'd be the best way.
Okay, so I'll try and do some form of editing on the chat and pump those across to Edith. So please, those of you who have questions, start asking them. We'd be very grateful. Okay, so and while people are formulating their questions, I suppose I have a thought, which was just listening to some of the absolutely fabulous sound pieces on the 0800 number. It's not really a question, it's a statement. It just occurred to me that we think of home as being a place of sort of refuge and stability, but it seems to me from the things that are on that contribute to those sound pieces that it's actually a place of where there's a great deal of multivalency. Everything is sort of overlaid. All your memories are overlaid all over each other, and they exist in the present as well as the past. And it strikes me, particularly listening to some of the things that Andy Kingston wrote and speaks with great clarity about, that actually home is remembering how things used to be in a place where they very much are no longer that way, and that seems to me very interesting. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that. And that would be my first statement rather than question, because nobody else yet has asked a question.
Yeah, well, I was certainly struck because I gave the lovely 3 writers that engaged with that agreed to engage with the project a very, very broad brief. I didn't give them a brief, to be honest. I just said, would you be interested in writing something about home? And when they asked me what specifically, certainly in Andy's case, I said, well, have a look at the blog, have a look at the what's out there in terms of the prompts on social media. I don't think Andy does social media to such an extent, but anyway, yeah, a few days later, or no, a couple of weeks, there was the story, you know, and the same with Sarah and Ali. I sent them some postcards of home, which it has a long history with a previous project that we did together, and yeah, the things that came back were amazing. Very rich, very varied, and yet had a lot of lovely, lovely connections. And it was just so rewarding to have such an open way to work, and yet get something that's so coherently. It's just wonderful. Yeah, I was struck.
I agree with you. I think they are. I mean, and both of them actually, they're Radio 4 quality. So we have the first question that came in is from Caroline, and she's asking, has doing a project on home changed your ideas about home?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's the same as what Natalie asked earlier. It's still in the making. Certainly this lockdown has changed my view of home. As you say, Matthew, this whole sort of, the fact that it's so multi-layered and that we've all retreated into our homes, I found quite striking at the beginning, because the exhibition was going to be much more about, yeah, the socio-political sort of aspects of home, if you like, and migration and all that. And suddenly it became about, you know, those little tiny views or big views out of the window for those who have them. And, you know, it was very early, very early on, it became apparent that not everyone has a great experience about home, you know. So it was, yeah, definitely changed my sense of what home is about. I think for everyone, and definitely for me, yeah.
So questions. That's a very relevant and good answer. Questions coming in thick and fast now.
Yes.
Edith, from Luciana, basically saying, I'm interested to learn how you're seeing your work process moving forward, since your work is very involved with touch and interaction through touch. Any thoughts on that, Edith?
Well, again, it's early days, you know. This is, for me, the first time that the works that are produced are so not related to touch. They're not out of touch, hopefully, but they're not related to, they don't involve touch. They don't involve touch in the gallery. They do involve touch, but at home, I suppose. So it's very early days for me to say. I don't know. I mean, I've done a few audio pieces before, but again, you know, people sat with headphones in a gallery. Listening on the phone to a story is a very different proposition, you know. Downloading a drawing, I don't know. I'm gonna wait and see.
I have to say that as sound pieces go, they're really rather marvelous, and I think they do actually, in some ways, they work better on an 0800 number than they do when you sometimes go and see sound pieces in a gallery when there's not any particular atmosphere or installation to go with them. We've got a question from Yonat, which says that she's particularly interested in 2 points. Firstly, your thoughts about archive and collection, and 2, the mobile. Where did the idea come from? Were you thinking particularly about a mobile above a baby's bed? You did mention that. What are your thoughts on archive and your mobile?
Yeah, so I live with a collector, and I'm also a bit of a collector by default, or I suppose I'm interested in archives. And I do have archives of postcards and slides and other objects, but that I use in my artwork, and I have used before and hopefully will again. The phone cards specifically came from Nick, my partner, who just presented them one morning and said, would these be of interest? You're doing a show in Luton about home. This is, there was one phone card that actually called Call Home. It says Call Home on the phone card. And I think by lunchtime I had the idea, but I can't honestly say how I don't remember why it became a mobile as such. It just seemed to make sense to make them move. They're light, they are beautiful objects, and they're like sweetie wrappers, you know. So I wanted to make them, and I can't make anyone touch them. So I suppose one thing led to another, and yeah.
And I was very excited that I had been to one of the places on one of your phone cards and was able to show you a photograph.
But that was it. It was one of those things that people immediately connected to, which was also fun. You know, as soon as I started showing those phone cards to people online, obviously, they connected to them. I think they operate a bit like postcards. There is a relationship there. So.
Yeah, and postcards also referencing in many ways the world of the past, because people don't really send postcards anymore, or not very much, and they are really quite lovely things to receive, actually. Moving swiftly on, a reach into theory and philosophy from Matthew Bowman, saying that he's rather interested in Martin Heidegger's discussion of homelessness, and that being one of the bases of modernity, but he's also interested in how people discuss home. There's something singular about it, something circumscribed and definite and identifiable with a particular place or identity. But can we think of home as internally plural? What do we need to speak of homes in the plural or singular plural? Don't quite know what the singular plural is, Matthew. So maybe you could clear that up for us. But as the essence of homeliness, we think of home as the essence of homeliness. How might we rethink Heidegger's melancholic diagnosis of modernity? I've just started to dip my toe into Heidegger for another project, but I'm certainly not qualified to answer that. But I'm sure that Idit is qualified to answer.
No. I've managed to do a whole PhD without mentioning Heidegger.
But I mean but Matthew's point about the plurality, which was kind of a rather more elegant way of putting some of the things that I said at the beginning about how multivalent it is. We associate it with a place, but it actually means lots of different overlaid memories and ideas all in one place.
Yeah, and also that we all move, and you know, the modern condition is about sort of, you know, having more than one home. And one of the things that was quite striking at the beginning, I only did a couple of pop-ups, real pop-ups in public places, but the responses there were quite clear that home isn't about the bricks and mortars and the objects even. And the lovely things that we have around us. They are about the people and about and that can go with us. And those that sort of talked about home somewhere else, because quite a lot of them were students from the university, and I think there is a large number of people who come from other places. It was about the sort of having to move away from the people. That was the home. It was not so much the physical thing, which was quite interesting, and that it was very much associated with moving, with transitioning from one place to another. I don't know if that answers the Heidegger question, but certainly what I got from people.
I'm not sure this is really the moment to answer the Heidegger question in detail, but it is Matthew's question is certainly a fascinating question, but we might need rather longer and perhaps a more specialized seminar to discuss that one. We've got a couple of questions from David Landau. Basically, firstly, a straight factual question. Where did you get all the phone cards from? They must be old. I think you said something about your husband found them.
Yes, so he collects, I mean, he found them in a charity shop, I think, and he picked them up without thinking about my project. And I think months later, when I was working on the project, he sort of presented them. He does that sort of thing. So, and then they're very easy to find online. So a bit like postcards. There's a world out there of collectors, and yeah.
I mean, to me, that they are the most. It's a lovely show, but they're certainly the most aesthetically pleasing to me. But then I do like photography. And then David actually has another interesting supplementary question. You live in Cambridge, which is widely considered to be aesthetically beautiful. So what were your first impressions of Luton? And it does famously appear in the Crap Towns book. And David's saying, you know, he likes to think that artists have a different way of approaching things and seeing things. What did you think when you were first ambling around Luton?
I don't think of things in terms of the aesthetics, and I think sometimes things that are too beautiful are just that. They're too beautiful. They're not. They become a postcard, for lack of a better analogy. I think Cambridge city centre, certainly since it was massively gentrified, suffers from that quite a lot, in fact. And I found it really interesting, actually, the juxtapositions, the differences between your part of the town, you know, where the gallery and the hat factory are, and just a few meters beyond it, and then again at the Arndale Center, which is obviously a sort of this huge thing that was built in the middle. There was something so, yeah, disjointed about it that it was interesting, to be honest. And then around Luton, I found some quite interesting and rather lovely places, to be honest. So, yeah.
I mean,
I was looking forward to exploring more and to finding out more about, you know.
people have often asked me, you know, why I quite often get people looking askance at me when I say I started at a contemporary art gallery in Luton, but and I didn't come to Luton. I certainly didn't dislike the place, but I didn't come because I thought it was particularly aesthetically pleasing or beautiful. But I have come to really actually rather love the aesthetic of it. I mean, the remarkable work that culture trusts are doing with refurbishing all these buildings, they're able to do that because those buildings, because as a town it was not incredibly swimming in wealth. It actually quite a lot of wonderful buildings and wonderful aesthetics got preserved. I think Luton may very well emerge into something extremely aesthetically pleasing, and certainly with its own aesthetics. So that's just an aside from me. Can I move on to another question, which we're very delighted to have Marie Kirbyshaw with us, who's the chief executive of the Culture Trust Luton, and asking about collections and collections, and they do some wonderful things with collections and collectors at the Wardown House Museum, and she's asking how you selected, edited, and curated your work. I mean, I suppose in many respects, a home is a collection of, you know, things you like, and my mother-in-law, for example, has a huge collection of model monkeys. Everybody has a sort of a corner of their house, or most of us, where we might gather things. Did any of those questions come into your mind when you were putting the show together, Edith?
Yeah, I think when the lockdown sort of started setting in, and people were, and we'd already started with the prompts, it was quite striking that yeah, the objects in the home became quite a thing, and so yeah, there were lots of still lives that people sent. I don't know if I asked for them, or I can't remember, to be honest, but and I certainly took some, and it did make me realize that yes, or it enhanced my realization, I suppose, that we are all to a certain degree collectors. And Warden House, in fact, was one of the beautiful places I found in Luton, and I did sit there in their lovely cafe with the glass top table, and they have a collection which is not of phone cards, but of the cigarette cards, which I also have a collection of, underneath that glass. And I was really struck by it because I collect them too. And that house generally is also very much about, yeah, collections and stuff. How did I don't know, the curation of a show, or I mean, that's Natalie and I did together, I suppose, and we weeded down stuff to what we thought was the most relevant, or the most pertinent to the time and to the place. And yeah, so it was a very organic process, and I'm not sure I can sort of
well, and it was organic and very successfully realized under the circumstances. It really is. It's astonishing that we've got a show at all. It's one thing, as we are learning at the moment with what we're programming to come up. It's one thing to program something where you imagine it from the start to be something that would take place in the windows, or something that takes place digitally, but it's quite another thing to think you're going to have what we might call a traditional gallery show, but then realise it's only going to take place digitally in the windows. And I think we're, just as an aside, we're hugely in the debt of one of our curators, Paul, who basically was a true genius in finding solutions to things like how do you get an 0800 number, which none of us knew anything about. I've got a question from Spanders, which basically says that departure lounge is within touching distance of so many different kinds of homes. There's the student accommodation out to the right-hand side as you look out the front window. There's the arts and the old industries of the hat factory and the commercial world of the Arndale, not to mention homelessness, which is very much in evidence at Departure Lounge. And we've actually become quite good friends with some of the homeless people working where we do. Did these different homes impact on the way that you thought about and put the show together, Idit? Natalie, even?
Go on, you look like
well, sadly less so than they would have done, I'm sure, if I'd been in Luton for the actual sort of research period, which we were prevented from doing. So yes, the original idea was to actually take the model home that I made in order to generate conversations to a homeless group, to the library. I managed to get them to the students, but not to the accommodation. And people were already leaving in great numbers, I think, from the university. So sadly, it was much less Luton specific than I would have liked, or than was intended, I suppose. But
just to kind of add to that, I guess whilst our ability to go and meet and talk with people from those buildings in person, we would hope that their voices or their experiences came through some of the kind of social media interactions and through the prompts that way. So not in terms of how those specific buildings impacted the project, probably gently bubbling underneath, but it was a shame that that kind of face-to-face contact couldn't happen and those stories couldn't happen in person. But I'm sure that some of those social media responses were informed by residents of that area.
Anything from you on that, Idit?
No, I think I've said it, and I think Natalie's right. I think the responses from the social media were, you know, very much part of the way the show was conceived and sort of, you know, structured. So those things fed in, but sadly not buildings themselves in Luton, or not individual. Yeah.
Well, perhaps we can have you back one day. I do.
I'd like that.
I do tend to do things that other sort of independent curators don't do, which is I do tend to work repeatedly with the same people, almost like a commercial gallery, except we're so not commercial. But apropos of that, David Landau has offered to give you a very specific guided tour around Luton, and we can certainly get you in touch with him if you'd be interested. So
yeah, next time I'm there, I would love to.
Come back to me. He's quite an aficionado of the locality. Has anybody else got anything else to add? We're doing very well. It looks like we're going to bring it in on time.
Can I just say thank you very much to everyone at Departure Lounge and Revolution Arts, because you've been amazing to work with, especially under these circumstances. I can't imagine, what it would be like to work in person, but thank you very much for everything. It's been amazing.
Well, then I
I'm
too.
just really sad that we don't get an opening for this thing, and we don't get to have a drink together. And
Okay, so we do have one more. We have another question from,
okay.
Joanna asking whether your work brought you into contact with Luton's multilingual heritage. I think there's a lot of linguistic expertise within households that can remain hidden within official monolingual public spaces. I think at one point it was either with you or with somebody else. We did talk about all the languages that were spoken in Luton, but perhaps that wasn't with you, Idit.
No, I certainly remember having that conversation. And I think, again, like the buildings, possibly less so. Maybe that's also to do with social media, because although we know that some of the people that interacted through social media were from Luton, the unanimous language of social media is English. So we never got down to that level of conversation, which, you know, if it had been a personal encounter, I'm sure would have cropped up, because people always ask me, so where are you from? Because of my accent, you know, and that always generates the, you know, a very different conversation.
But it reminds me of something actually that happened with my kids in their school. My sister-in-law is a teacher in Florida, and we got the kids to be pen friends with her class. And the kids in Florida were actually astonished by this question that the British kids were asking, which was basically, what language do you speak at home? They all speak English at home. They speak English in class, and that it kind of opens up the idea that there's this treasure of coexistent realities that exist in a place like Luton, because people might speak a completely different language at home than they do when they have to go out and about and do business. And I do think that is a really interesting one. Yeah. That Joanna asked, you know, how and whether that could be explored.
Well, I think that's another show. So if you have me back, I'll do another show. I did discover while I was working on this that some languages have a different way of saying home. So, for example, I believe that French language doesn't have home in the same way that the English language or even the Hebrew language, which is my first language.
Or indeed in the German language, the word Connie, if she's in the background there, the word Heimat in German, that actually it means home, but it also means the relationship with home. It kind of it has all these sub meanings about the organic relationship with land, and was of course effectively and very successfully misused by the Nazis. And
yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing, and I'd love to look more into that, and and maybe Luton will be the place to look to start that new investigation. Be great.
So we have a final comment from Yonat saying she likes how all of our homes are present in this meeting. We've certainly been getting used to that in the last few months, haven't we? And Yonat also says home and body, apropos organic. That brings us to 7:30. So we are in theory done. Would you like to bring proceedings to a close, Fahad?
Yeah, it's been great having everyone obviously on board, and thank you to Matthew Shaw for arranging this with the amazing artist Idit. And it's been very, interesting actually to hear the exhibition. I'm used to going to exhibitions as well, and I've been to the storefront quite a few times, and this was like a different experience for everyone to come together, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you want to see when our next event, obviously for Revolution Arts, join our mailing list. Just go to revolutionarts.com, and that'd be it. But have a great evening, and it's nice to have everyone And, I've got my background on, but obviously I'm still at home, working from home. So it's been great to
And
actually
if
hear
I may
everyone.
just say to end, obviously, if people would like to join our mailing list, visit departure-lounge.org.uk, where you can sign up to our mailing list. We have some remarkable projects coming up. We can, at the moment, only do digital programming and programming in our windows, but we've got some remarkable artists coming up. Haley Morris Cafiero will be next, and she's American based in Belfast, and we have the certifiable lunatic Thomas Mylander showing probably in November. It looks like we will be able to have a traditional show with people in the gallery in December, and that will be Abby Spendlove's show, which is delayed. But if you join our mailing lists, we can let you have information on all of those. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming, and really, really great to have you here, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.